Thank you for joining me on debate series Marriage.
Dun dun dun.
Dun dun dun. The reason why I wanted to invite you onto this pod to talk about marriage, not because my friend bailed on me. No, the reason I wanted to have you on talk about marriage.
Appreciate this invite.
No, first of all, it's because I love you.
Yeah.
Love you. And second of all, I know that you have really staunch views against marriage.
Yeah, okay. That's true.
It is true. So before we kind of like dive into why you are never getting married, I I thought what would be interesting is to, as per the style of some of my debate series pods, I like to give people and give you a little bit of a refresher on what we're talking about and potentially roots that we didn't know where it came from or what the concept or phenomenon that we're talking about is founded in.
Oh wow, okay. It's going to be educational for me too.
Yeah, I actually just wanted to give you a history lesson and indoctrinate you into why you should marry your girlfriend. Jokes.
Not going to happen. She's great. I love her, but not going to happen.
Okay, great. I can't wait to get stuck into those reasons with you.
Sure.
So before, this is actually interesting. So I would be interested to know if you know anything about this, because a lot of people, when they say they don't want to get married, some of the reason is because they're like, why would I do that? I'm just giving myself away to the man. You're essentially, when you agree to get rid of your surname, you marry a man, whoever you're getting married to. But in classic cases of a straight people, a woman and a man marrying themselves, the woman gives up her surname and essentially becomes that man's property. And so I did kind of know that, and I knew that, the man has to get the father's agreeance into that woman being like given to that man. I think I'm using a lot of words that sound a little bit convoluted right now, but you know what I mean. The woman essentially becomes the man's property, and I knew that was kind of the case, but then I wasn't really sure where this concept of love comes into it, because it does seem that nowadays people are really motivated to get married because of the concept of love. But I knew that wasn't really what marriage used to be. So doing some research, just to give you a little bit of a lowdown, marriage is apparently about a 4,350-year-old institution. In hunter-gatherer times, we then had to settle into more agrarian kind of civilizations as society needed more stable arrangements. The first recorded evidence of marriage ceremonies between a man and a woman, between one man and one woman, dates from 2350 BC in a place called Mesopotamia. Then it was embraced by the ancient Hebrews, Greeks, and Romans, and back then it had little to do with love. By the way, I'll post about what website I've got this from in the description. Originally, it was to bind women to men to guarantee that her children were his. Through marriage, a woman became a man's property. A father would hand over his daughter. If their wives failed to produce a child, the husband could give them back and marry someone else.
Jesus.
Just go, don't want you.
Well, this is saying, like, because I would argue marriage, less women and man, but more like person who's earning the most money and who isn't. It's swung the other way, and it's like really unfair to one side. But it sounded like it was pretty fucking unfair to the woman at the beginning who was like giving birth.
But did you not know that? Did you not know that? I don't mean to, patronize you online, but did you not know, that marriage was founded in mostly women being kind of given off to the man, and it was kind of like, here, this is your property now, you can do as and what you will with her?
No, I guess back in the day, it seemed like the rules around how you treat people were obviously like a little questionable. It's amazing. All these like amazing things got built, like the pyramids and stuff, because basically we just threw human suffering and bodies at just doing things instead of actually like caring about people or anything. I didn't know that. I didn't know it was as much about, essentially marriage was just purely a possession kind of thing, which sounds bad enough in its own way.
It was mostly a possession kind of thing, and then religion decided to get involved when the Roman Catholic Church also became a became a powerful institution in Europe. And when the Roman Catholic Church became a super powerful institution, the blessing of a priest became a necessary step for marriage to become recognized. So then apparently in the 8th century, marriage was accepted in the Catholic Church as a kind of sacrament. And apparently that from around 1563, when you have the Council of Trent, like I know what that is, but apparently you have the Council of Trent, 1563, when marriage becomes more recognized within Catholicism, apparently women do start to get a little bit more respect, because it's kind of like, well, you know, God and love thy neighbor, and we are one unit and shall be one flesh. And that's when apparently the man and the woman were given each other exclusive access to one another. So aka you can only have sex with each other, you can't have also multiple mistresses. In the eyes of God, that was kind of seen as bad, whereas before I think it was more like la 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 you can have gangs of whoever that you want to sleep with, and then you have your wife.
Sounds hectic.
It sounds hectic. But anyway, I think from that point on, it was supposed to be more, you are one with this person. And then supposedly only in the Middle Ages did the idea of love as a motivating factor become within that picture. Apparently that's because of 12th century literature, where it was telling men that they should woo the object of their desire through compliments and things like that. This woman called Marilyn Yalom, who's a Stanford professor who also wrote A History of the Wife, praised the concept of romantic love, because apparently that was actually a really catalyzing good force of nature for women, because then they kind of were treated like, oh, you should actually treat them nicely and tell them they look good, and, you know, do nice things for them, and like services and stuff like that, through the idea of love.
So every 1,000 years there's like a marginal improvement.
Exactly, there's something that happens which, you know, is meant to be a little bit better. And then apparently men, however, still own their wives in this saga. They still own their wives. Like when Americans went and colonized, I think this is around like 1700s now. They still pretty much own their wives. They, when a woman and a man gets married, the legal status of that woman is just kind of like not sunken in, that's really weird to describe it, but the legal status of that woman kind of goes underneath that man's identity, household. Her name is surrendered. He now represents two people, so he becomes more important. And then apparently the final thing, which means that marriage kind of started to change and women started to gain more legal rights, is from when women started to get the right to vote. So shout out to New Zealand for being the first country that gave women the right to vote in 1892. And then I'm just going to talk about the UK because that's where I'm from, but 1918, that's when women got the right to vote here, and then 1920 in the USA, and that's when you have two full citizens in each marriage union, and then you have introduction of more laws like 1970s laws against marital rape, etc, etc, etc. So now that we know...
Wait. 1970 was the first time there was a rule against you can't rape the person you're with when you're married to them.
I think that is just within the UK, yeah.
Jesus. I mean, that's quite a timeline. It's like 4,000 years before you get to that point.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's quite a lot. Let me see. The women's movement in the 1970s led to changes in the law. In 1976, Nebraska became the first state to throw out its marital rape exception law.
Do you know what the exception law was? Like, that's quite interesting. Like, could you rape who you were married to prior to 1976?
Yeah, I think so. I think because it wasn't deemed as rape, it was just kind of like, well, that's a part of it.
I mean, I guess if you saw someone in legally as like a possession, but you would have thought that would kind of go out with the whole slavery thing. Jeez.
Yeah, I know. But I think women also only got the right to be able to divorce and take their children also around that time. But so that's kind of like the background and history of marriage, which is super crazy and interesting, particularly because like nowadays, I basically did this poll on Instagram asking people how they feel about marriage, what are their motivations in marriage, do they want to get married? And one which I think is pretty relevant to what we're talking about right now and super interesting is that I asked people, do you think it's better to marry for circumstance or love? And 79% of people said love. Obviously 21% of people said circumstance. Do you think that, we'll get into personal views in a bit, but do you think marrying someone for this concept of love is a good idea?
No. I just straight up, like, I don't think it's a great way of deciding it. Like, if you're... and totally fair enough, like if that's how your audience see it, but in my head it's way more romantic, or you're way more in love with someone if you stay with them, not because contractually like you're obligated to. Because I can't see, I mean, it's a bit tough because you just gave 4,000 of years of how like one side was completely suffering, and now as a man or someone who, you know, thinks they'll bring back like money or whatever and all of that kind of stuff, going, oh no, it's not right to get married when another group have suffered for like thousands of years. But that being said, what's the argument to say that you love someone more just because you signed a piece of paper that the government basically then get in the middle of and say, well, if you leave, there's like all these financial penalties involved to both of you. Like, are you actually staying with them because you love them, or because there's going to be a whole bunch of ramifications if you don't?
Mm-hmm. So is that why you don't want to get married? Like, can you explain why you don't want to get married?
So, I mean, so if it started, because obviously, look, I have like no life experience in this, right? Like 29, never been married, never, like, it's not really been on the cards as something that like is going to happen or something that I wanted to happen. And it started from just listening to like either like favorite comedians or different shows, and they'd start with these jokes about don't ever get married and why you'd never want to do it. But then when you dive into it, it's like, actually there's a whole lot of logic behind it. So say if you listen to like Opie and Anthony in America, which is one of the biggest radio shows behind Howard Stern, or you listen to Bill Burr, who was like, I'm never getting married in 2013, and now he's married, and a bunch of other people. But there just doesn't seem to be a whole lot of upside for it. Like back, you know, when you're talking like Victorian times, and, you know, it sounds like the man basically had every right in the world and the woman had nothing, and the woman couldn't do anything. I could kind of see the value in it for the woman in particular, and also that to make sure that she was protected in case some guy, you know, goes out and is a dick and does a bunch of evil things and is really, really poorly behaved. But now I don't really see the upside from like a relationship perspective. The only thing it does is it really enables security. But it kind of enters you into this contract that basically means one person can act however they want to, really, be a dick, treat you really badly, all of this stuff. And then at the end, you legally have to go through a separation to make it happen, as opposed to just being able to leave when you want. So I just couldn't see the benefit in doing it. And I just think if you do it, you're just going to end up getting involved in this thing that you can't ever get out of. And if you can't get out of it without them being legals or financials behind it, does that have anything to do with your relationship and how much you love the person?
Right. But what you just said about, okay, maybe it doesn't mean more in terms of your relationship with that person, or it doesn't prove anything more. There are things that I was looking up to do with financial reasons why it is actually better to get married. And these are things I didn't really know about. And I was wondering if you knew about these things. Like, for example, it was talking about why marriage does make financial sense. So apparently, if you have a couple who have a really uneven income, they generally can get like a marriage bonus, which can be as high as 20% of a couple's income. I also don't really know what that means, if I'm being totally honest. Like a couple one person makes loads of money and the other person doesn't make as much money. Yeah. From what I understood, it means like the person who makes loads of money, they can fall into a lower tax bracket because they can fall into that lower income. That person who has the lower income, they can say like that's kind of the overall amount that they make, or it reduces it a lot, so they can avoid tax as high as 20%. Is my guess. However, I could have just interpreted that wrong.
Oh, but there's loads of tax breaks and things that you can do by getting married. So like another big one is inheritance. So if you marry your partner and then one of you or your partner passes away, the other partner will be entitled to the worth and all of that stuff, and the pension and all of these kind of things. And there are rules around if you don't get married, you actually can't access certain things and certain assets. So if you're looking at it purely from like a financial perspective, and you're looking at the net, like regardless of who it is, the overall money going up, I think there's a bunch of reasons to say it's worth getting married. But that has nothing to do with my logic as to why I wouldn't get married.
Oh, because I guess I always thought for you, because you're right, talking about the things that can benefit you. You just mentioned the inheritance thing. I just read an article that Phrase sent me about in an article called This Is Money, where a couple was married for 33 years. He died, but she couldn't inherit his state pension because they were never married, or they never had a civil partnership, or whatever you call it. So obviously she gets screwed there.
Yeah.
And it's really sad. But I always thought that you didn't want to get married because you were like, well, if I make money, then I don't want to split that with someone 50-50, which also made sense because, not to get too deep, but our parents had a messy divorce and financial things were confusing, especially because our mum didn't work and our dad did. And yeah, so why?
Well, she did work. It was just she didn't earn as much, and she worked really hard. She just didn't earn as much as dad.
Yeah, exactly. So if it's not fine, so does finance not play a role in it with you then?
No. So finance plays a role, but I don't think for the reason you might have thought. So it has nothing to do with. It does have something to do with. I don't think the idea of like an equal split makes any sense. Like Bill Burr has a thing where he's like, what, just, you get divorced and all of a sudden a certain lifestyle is needed to be maintained, and the price of Weetabix is like 10 grand all of a sudden. They need like a 30 grand a month retainer if you make that kind of money. It's just bullshit. Yeah. And that doesn't seem like it makes any sense. But the actual reason, and this is from a guy called Patrice O'Neill, who's like this hilarious guy. He's dead now, but he was so funny. But have you ever seen the movie Heat?
I can't remember.
So Heat is a movie, it's like one of the only times that like Robert De Niro and Al Pacino are in the same movie. It's like classic 90s movie, like crime drama. Al Pacino's like this cool cop and like, chasing down the bad guy, Robert De Niro, who's as calculated as you can be. And Robert De Niro is so good because of like a key philosophy that he has as a criminal. And the idea of it is never be part of anything that you can't walk out on in 30 seconds or less. That's the idea.
So you can always intense.
And as savage as this sounds, I think that's actually a great way to have a relationship. The reason being, like, if you love someone and you want to be there with them and you're committed to them, you're not just going to walk out for nothing. But if there's stuff that's getting in the way of you being able to just walk out, and that stuff isn't anything to do with you and that person actually being connected or caring about each other, but a bunch of obligations and a bunch of financial implications and a bunch of difficulties. And as you saw with our parents, like them breaking up, the house, everything, there was all this tension and it made life so hard. It's pretty much a guaranteed route to have a shit time and to have a really bad experience in your life, which you don't need to have. And so for me, the most romantic thing, the most valuable thing, the best thing that you could have is you actually want to be with that person, and there's nothing getting in the way of that. That being said, 100% it would piss me off if, I don't know, I'm, a superstar athlete and I'm Cristiano Ronaldo, I'm scoring like 100 goals a year or however many goals the guy's scoring, and his wife has like never scored a goal and she gets like 100 million in a divorce settlement. It's like, fucking come on. Like, you've had a great life.
Okay.
Have something good.
Fair, but
yeah.
First of all, your first point on you can only walk out, you should be able to walk out on anything within 30 seconds or less, I think is an attitude which like I aspire to. It's kind of rooted in what sounds like stoicism, of that you should always be, you shouldn't be like fully reliant or dependent on somebody for anything. And you should, if I'm understanding you correctly, like you should be kind of at 100% and feel complete. And then so that, is that right? Like, so or am I confusing what you're saying? So that you feel independent enough at any time that you will forever be okay on your own and you're not relying on anyone, whether that be financial, emotional, materialistic needs.
I think if I was boiling down what it meant, it's just you're there because you want to be there, not because you have to be there. And some piece of paper doesn't add any value or actually mean that's the case. So that doesn't actually enable a healthy relationship. It just ticks a box in your head that, oh, I'm in love and we're together, and you basically tick this box of feeling like you're never alone. But we know in reality, like, that's bullshit, and like most marriages end and it doesn't work and it's painful. And I think it's a lot better if people are there because they want to be there and they know that, as opposed to and that's why I didn't agree with your audience, like, you marry for the purpose of love. It's like, yeah, but don't you love someone if you just stay with them? Why do you have to marry them? Really, it's like a security thing.
Sure, I think that was already addressing people who did believe in marriage, and it was
Oh,
saying that if
fair.
you do believe in marriage, then do it for that reason. But yeah, I kind of think you're right. You're born into this world alone, you die alone. You don't necessarily need somebody.
No, but that's the thing though. That's not what I'm saying. I'm trying to say like it has nothing, whether you are happy with someone or not, has nothing to do with whether you get married to them. Like all it's saying is, hey, I'm willing to make this commitment with you. That means I'm willing to sacrifice or put everything on the line from like a financial, personal perspective. Like if you think about it legitimately, it's the worst possible contract you could sign, i.e., the other person you're with can act however they want, regardless. And regardless of the outcome, you're pretty much either going to split it down the middle or close enough. And in reality, the breadwinner, whether it's the guy, girl, trans, whatever, doesn't matter. The person who's making the most money, they're probably going to have to pay the legal fees of the other party. So they're going to pay 2/3, not half, of everything they earn. And it just becomes like, what's the point? It doesn't make any sense.
Right, so you should just be with the person that you want to be with out of love because you actually want to be there, because you actually want to show up every day, not because you signed something because of this big romantic idea of I'm going to be with someone and that will make me whole.
Yeah, and then if it ends, look, all right, so let's say the biggest commitment you can really make is like having kids. Like forget marriage, like it's nothing compared to that. And if it ends and you're a scumbag and you don't look after the other person when they really need it and genuinely like they were a good person, just it didn't work out, or they spent their career looking after their kids, then that's on you and that's being a bad person. But what I respect and what I don't have any problem with is if people say, well, say I want to look after my kids and I want to stay at home and I don't therefore want to go out and do the job and I want the other person in the relationship to do that. And marriage is my way of protecting myself. So when I'm bringing this value to the table, it means I don't end up with nothing. Like I respect that legitimately as an argument to get married for that person. It just doesn't necessarily mean I want to sign up to it. But I try and be upfront with anyone, like whoever I'm going out with or my girlfriend now, like just straight up, that's how I see it. So then you can decide whether you want to stay or not.
Right, and in which case, by the way, I think you keep touching your phone, which is making a funny noise thing on the thingy. So
Oh, sorry.
It's all right. Just want to, respect the quality of the mic. Which I guess in a way, would you be okay if somebody said, listen, I want to have children, so I want to draw up a contract in order to respect the financial or security of the children in the future if we aren't together, but I'm okay with not being married within like the government's eyes, but we need to have some sort of contract just between us two.
Yes, I mean, I don't think you need a contract for being obliged to look after the kids. Like you should all, I mean, I'm pretty sure that's
true.
But if it's
that's true.
If it's looking after the other person, I think like, and look, this is as unromantic as it gets, but I think it's necessary. Like if you're going to have that conversation, if one of the two people that are together feel like they don't want to go out and have a job and they want to look after the kids, there's definitely an intrinsic value to that. Just the argument I'm making is, well, if the other person then goes out and sells a company for 100 million, that value isn't 50 million quid. Like, let's be honest, like it's a lot less than that. And you should figure out what that is beforehand and then agree it if you want to do it that way. For me, like the person I'd want to be with, I want them to have a job. Like I want them to be full time. I don't think it's a good thing for them to just stay at home forever and be a parent. But, it's their choice. And if I really want to be with them and they don't want to do that, then we'd have to figure something out. I just wouldn't sign a marriage paper.
I think, like some people, I agree with you. I would want somebody who I think is involved in something full time rather than just looking after the kids. However, when I say just looking after the kids, that is a lot of work. And some people really feel like that is their life's meaning, and fair enough for them. It's just, I probably wouldn't want to be with them. And it doesn't sound like you would either.
I think that's the thing that's hard, right? Is like, you can when you say like, hey, I build a company that's worth lots of money, or I'm super successful at this or that, it can sound really like, oh, you're not valuing what someone's doing by staying at home with the kids. And that's true. And there's definitely a lot of value that they can bring and you should talk about it. But it's when people come and say like, well, it's worth 50-50 because that person couldn't have done it without them. Like, I just don't, a lot of the time I don't buy that argument. And if you really break it down, like what's harder to do, like to raise a kid or to sell a company for that much? Like It's no, but it's true. It's true. Like people can no. You have to be able to accept it. Like, put it this way: if it was as easy, then everyone would be making companies worth 100 million quid. Like, it's not as easy, obviously. And that's why I don't think if the value was equal, then I'd be like, fair enough, it should be split 50-50, sign me up. But I don't buy it. It's just bullshit. Like,
this is what I'm happy you brought it back to this, because I wanted to bring it back to this, where you spoke about Cristiano Ronaldo and well, if I was Cristiano Ronaldo and I made X amount of money and then my wife, we got a divorce and I had all these children and she wanted half, there is an argument to say that let's say this is the stereotypical example of you have the male athlete, he earns millions and millions and millions, he's NBA champion or whatever, top of his game, top of his league and his sports thing. Then he has the wife who's at home, she technically doesn't achieve as amazing achievements that's seen by society, whether it's sports, finance, arts, whatever, but she stays at home, she gives him a family, she creates this environment that's arguably extremely loving and caring and compassionate, and he might not have been able to achieve those things had it not been for her support, love, home that she created, and he might not have reached that pinnacle of success. Surely, potentially, to be play devil's advocate, she deserves potentially half of what of the financial success that he reaped from those rewards, because that was rooted in a place of very good foundation that she was the main contributor for.
And even if you flip it the other way around, like, obviously the argument's always made like, oh, well, if this male basketball player do this, like, what if the top female athlete in the world, like Serena Williams, right? Like, forget women, like one of the best athletes in the world, hands down, one of the most winningest people ever.
She is married to someone like extremely wealthy though, isn't she, as well? Like that guy who founded Reddit.
Yeah, exactly. But
Still, argument is still there.
Yeah, but I don't believe for a second, and to be honest, I bet you if you ask Serena Williams, and I could be wrong, that 50% of her value that would be created, I get she married him later, so it's like a different thing, but someone who becomes that great at it wasn't going to be pretty great at it regardless. Like, it's not like they're not comparable. Like, I know it sounds like I'm being a dick and I don't value the other side. Like, there's definitely value there, and there's definitely amazing things, and like building a family and building a relationship and all of that stuff, is really cool, and it will help. But if you're going to be the best in the world at something, you're pretty much going to be the best in the world at it, almost regardless of circumstance. And so I don't see it as 50-50 value at all. Like,
I know this is slightly different, but would you argue that, and this is to do with drugs and doping, but would you argue the same with Lance Armstrong?
What do you mean?
I know this is not to do with love and relationships, but I always just find this really interesting, total tangent. But the fact that he was best
cyclist in the world.
Best cyclist 7 years in a row or something. Unbelievable.
Won the Tour de France, yeah.
Won the Tour de France, was obviously taking drugs that enhanced his performance, although arguably everybody was.
Sure.
Do you think that he would have still been the best in his field because he was like already kind of the best, and then those drugs kind of enhanced him? I'm just really actually kind of curious as to what you think about this.
It's just completely left field.
I
mean, it is kind of off topic a bit. Like, the best athletes in the world are savages. Like, I mean, if you watch that guy's documentary, like, obviously went way off the tracks, like, ethically, really poor person, like, lied a lot to people and ruined people's careers and was willing to do what it takes. But that's the point. Like, the best athletes in the world are willing to do what it takes. And good relationship at home, bad relationship at home, yeah, there'll be marginal gains, and they might sleep slightly better if they're happier. But no way you're telling me, like, Roger Federer, like, I'm sure his wife created a ton. She's a perfect example, right? They have an amazing relationship, great family, been together for years, super, super happy. Don't tell me the level of talent that he has and the ability that he's been able to generate and revenue and all of those things. That's an equal value to creating a great relationship at home and building a great family. It's awesome, but if you're looking at it purely from a monetary perspective, it's not. And that's not to say, like, she deserves nothing or she doesn't deserve to be looked after, but she didn't create like 500 million or a billion's worth of value. Like, let's just stop bullshitting each other that happened. Like, he was going to be great regardless.
I agree. Like, on paper,
there you go.
Yeah, his talent, and then all those brand partnership deals, and
his work ethic and everything.
Yeah. All of that stuff. Sure, financially might not have, but I think the crux of this problem and the reason why we're never going to reach an actual answer on this is, how can you put in financial terms how can you equate money to that emotion and love that she potentially gave him? Do you know what I mean? Like, you can't put a price tag on that.
But that's my point. Don't. Yeah. Like, why do you have to? Why does there have to be this, like, because that is literally what the marriage contract is doing, is going, well, okay, everything you own is equal, or something of that nature, or close enough, and then you can choose at the end whether you stay or whether you go and all of that stuff. But in reality, like, if you just don't get married, you don't have to define that. And then if, you know, as someone who wants to stay at home and look after the family, you do want to have some level of comfort. That's the thing. Like, if the wife comes to you, or the girlfriend or the boyfriend or whoever comes to you and says, I want to get married, and the reason I'm doing it is because I need some security, because I'm going to give up a lot of stuff, I'd kind of respect the angle they're coming from. I wouldn't sign up to it. And if you're someone, if you just aren't for it, then I don't think you should have to. You should be able to be open about it.
Yeah.
But I totally respect it coming from that angle. If it's like, you know, so we're seen in the eyes of God as like, we really love each other and we're always going to be together and da-da-da. I just think it's bullshit. Like, no one's ever given me an argument that's actually gone, this is how I'm proving I'm more in love with you, unless that's the person who's got more to lose financially, in life, freedom, all those things, than the other person. Like, no one's ever given me an argument for that, and I'd love to hear it if you have one.
It's very interesting, because some people say, so let me find the statistic. I put up one poll on Instagram saying, do you think your partner is less likely to be unfaithful if you're married? And that kind of goes in with what you're saying with, do you think you can prove that you're more in love? I mean, not really technically, it doesn't go in line, but it's in the same like realm. Do you think you can prove that you're more in love with this person if you married them? Or do you think that person is less likely to be unfaithful if you're married? 75% of people agree with kind of what you're saying, no. And 25% think that, yeah, you might be less faithful, and you might be like less in love. And I agree with you in the sense that, sure, maybe in like really realistic, unromantic terms, you don't prove that you are more in love with someone, but there's so much in society and like Disney films, and not just Disney films, normal films, and we work towards this idea of marriage, especially as women. I don't know if it's so much as men, but as like a goal, like that there's a right time, and then when you get to this right time, like before kind of your 30s or just when you turn 30, you like get married and it's a big tick. Do you think that that's like a way of thinking that we have to start changing?
It's a tough one. Like, I almost see it kind of the same way as like religion, or organized religion, really, in the sense that it's something that's been around for years. It's going to stay, but really it's religion or it's marriage that needs to make the argument as to why it's worth doing it. Because you can, if you're an atheist, right, you're basically saying, I don't think I believe in God. I don't think there's enough evidence. If there is, prove it to me, and maybe I'll change my mind. And marriage is kind of the same thing. It's like today, like 100 years ago, I get it, because women didn't have the same rights as men, and there's still obviously a lot of challenges out there in the workplace and but let's be honest, it's a lot better than it was. And back then it was a good form of security and protection, so that a woman was protected compared to the man in the classic way that it's done. But now I just don't see it. I don't see a case for it, either from a romantic point of view or less than that. Just even like, what's the best thing to do? It just doesn't seem to make a lot of sense.
And you are right, because something that you spoke about before, where I mentioned, I was like, oh, but I think if you're married, it might be better because of your children. But actually I was looking at Citizens Advice, which is kind of like a legal advice website in the UK, and they say that apparently regardless if you're married or not, both parents are financially responsible to support their child if you're not living with each other, and even if he's not named on the child's birth certificate, or she's not named on the child's, what she I think has to be named on the child's birth certificate but right, the woman has to be named because she gives birth in the hospital and they write down the mum's name, I assume.
I don't know, I'm not there yet.
Anyway, either way, the child is protected, at least in the UK. So I think from that sense, it is okay, like you can bring up children. And on another poll that I did asking people if they think that marriage is essential in order to raise children, it was actually quite nice to see. I think it was about 85% of people said that they didn't believe that marriage was an essential phenomenon or institution in order to bring up a child. Trying to find the exact stat. Oh yeah, 82% of you said no, you don't think marriage is needed to raise kids. And I think that, like, from our own personal perspective, I know like ours is a unique one, but obviously our parents didn't get married until I was 14. You were...
Yeah, it was like 20 years or 19 years or something.
Yeah, exactly. And like we were raised fine. You know, and a lot of people, when I ask, you think that your upbringing was affected by marriage, some people said yeah, because it was really, really difficult actually going through divorce, and like when the dad left the home, again, that's like a stereotypical scenario, the mum can leave the home. So that was a way that in which, and a lot of people who were brought up in families where their parents were married and they stayed together because of that marriage, but actually they weren't really happy, that can be really badly affecting on kids. And then you have some people who have not had married parents and have had really happy childhood and upbringing. So I don't think there's anything to say that, you know, necessarily. I mean, some people were saying that they want to get married because of the idea of the family unit, of everybody having the same surname, which I do get. You know, there is something nice in that, of even if it sounds frivolous, like I like the idea of being like, oh, I'm going to take their surname. But actually, when I've done the history, I'm like, okay, that just means that I'm losing my identity and I'm just becoming a part of their identity. But you all have the same surname. You're all part of the same tribe. Like, in theory, that's a nice idea.
It is, but again, it comes down to that religion thing. So here's an example. Like, we're both fans of Christopher Hitchens, right? Dead now, super smart guy on religion and stuff. And he would always talk about how in religion, there would always be this argument of, look at all the great work that religious people do in terms of charity and going off into different places and being missionaries and all these kind of things. And he would always ask the audience the question, can you think of a noble action that a religious person did that someone who's non-religious couldn't do? And on the flip side, he'd always say, and can you think of an action that a religious person would do that's a bad thing that a non-religious person would never do? And it was always like a bit of a mic drop and no one could ever say anything to him, and he always won the argument. But when you look at marriage, I kind of see it in a similar way. Like, there's nothing there in the example you gave that was like, that's something that a non-married couple or a couple that isn't in a civil partnership or whatever it is couldn't do. You couldn't have a great family. You couldn't have great... Those are all things that you can do without being married. And I don't really see any argument that's helping mean, oh, I should put a piece of paper together. Because like, if we really break it down, when you're saying being married, you're saying the legal bit. Like, you're saying signing the contract. If I were to say, well, I'm happy to get married by having a party and make a bunch of commitments that like actually I mean at the time, because I assume most people do and they're good intentioned, but just there's no actual commitment there from a legal perspective. But when you say that to people, they're like, that's not what I mean. And then when you really get into it, it's like, but it doesn't really help the family have a better relationship or a different commitment. It's just a security thing. And that's fine. Yeah. But I'd rather people just say like, it's not fair on me if you're going to go out and work all the time and I don't want to do that we have this discrepancy in the rest of our life. Like, fair enough, say that. And then we don't have to agree and we just won't be together in the long term.
What if, I know this sounds really stupid, but what if somebody said, because I'm just trying to think of what you said is, you know, a new name for something doesn't really make a difference. Like, for example, you said, you're my wife now. It doesn't mean that they're going to actually stick around and be a nicer person. And it made me think of, even labels for boyfriend and girlfriend. Like, what's the point of having a label of like, you're my girlfriend now? It's just kind of like, well, do we even need a label for that? And I know the difference is that if you are married or if you're boyfriend and girlfriend, you have a legal document. But do you know what I mean? Like, maybe we don't need labels for anything. Like, can't we just be humans? And we don't need to define any kind of relationship.
Yeah, I mean, now you're getting into like a whole other theory, like philosophy. I have no idea. I just know I really don't want to sign a contract that basically means I have to fucking give everything up if the person's being a dick. Like, I'd rather just break up and that be the end of it. Just the horror stories. Like, I would just recommend for anyone who's thinking about getting married, totally fair, like, good luck to you if you are, just go listen to like Opie and Anthony, like Anthony getting a divorce or Bill Burr talking about it. And there's just so many questions they ask where I'm like, shit, I don't have any answers for those, so I'm going to avoid this thing.
You know, I would love to hear, because it's so common, and I love you because you showed me Opie and Anthony and Patrice O'Neill and Bill Burr. Like, they're so funny. And isn't Dave Chappelle, does he talk about divorce or is he married?
No, I think he is married. So I think he's happy.
And some of these people are massively happy, but a lot of the time you just hear like men talking about how miserable marriage is. And like, I would just love to get to a point where I hear women be like, it's just miserable, don't do it. Because right now, you know what I mean? I just feel like it's always guys being like, you shouldn't get married, blah, blah, blah. But maybe I'm not listening to the right stuff.
No, and I'm sure there are. It's more the person, when you hear them talk about it, it's rarely about the marriage. I mean, they do talk about marriage itself being a pain, but really it's all because they're like, marriage is hell when they don't want to be with the person anymore, but they're stuck there and they can't leave. And that's the worst. And then when they do leave and you go through divorce, you go through hell and there's so much money you have to pay. Like Anthony, after they got married for 10 years, he was paying not alimony, he was paying like divorce settlements to his wife for more than 10 years after that point. And it's like future fucking earnings, like what you're going to make in the future could be tied. And it's totally the other way around. Like if the woman or the other person is the biggest revenue generator, it's probably always going to be the person who makes the most that gets screwed over the most.
Yeah.
And that's where all this financials make it ugly. But it's really easy to say, right? Like quite often people need to put money together in order to have the lifestyle that they want. I just think you should be in a relationship where you can afford to live how you can afford, and if you need to end it or it needs to go, you can live your own life and be independent, and you're not fucking stuck together hating each other for years and just in this horrible experience. It sounds terrible, man, like the experiences that they have. And that's why I would never do it.
Two things on that. One thing, I spoke to Dad recently and he was talking about how expensive divorce is, and he said... God. He was like, but you know the way you have to think about it? You have to think about it is it's your price for freedom.
I bet he thinks about that now, yeah.
I bet, yeah. So that, and also, did you know, I didn't know this, two things. I always say two things. What, two things? Did you know that prenups in the UK aren't actually... Let me just, because I did not know this. I was Googling and I was like, what's the point then? Prenup is a legal agreement that sets out how assets should be divided between a couple in the event of a divorce. You set these out at the very beginning when you get married. Each party must have a legal advisor or must have legal advice on the document. But apparently, prenups, they don't actually stand up in the UK, so they're not 100% legally binding. Like, you go to court and family courts will respect them and they will appreciate them as long as there are certain stipulations held, like, for example, were they both in their right mind, is it fair? But it's just like, what? If you're getting married and you come up with a prenup of how you equally divide your assets, surely that should be the final document. Like, I would be pissed if I had agreed that, go to court, and then it's like, FYI, there's a judge who might change that. Like, what?
Before I made my decision on just never wanting to do it and being really clear about it, I asked a friend who was a lawyer who was like learning about these things, and he said, look, if you want to, the best way to not get stuck is to not sign a contract. Not sign a contract, but have another contract that says the first contract is void for X number of reasons, because you're just adding more ways in which it can be interpreted and fucking, I said this, but on a Tuesday when the sun is like at a certain height, it's fine. Like, so you just cause all these kind of problems. Just don't get married. The other challenge is, I think there's something in the UK that's like, if you're with someone for more than 5 years or living with them, there's some kind of like...
That's a myth.
Is it? Oh, thank God. Whew.
I googled it.
Oh,
Okay, it says the myth of common law marriage.
gonna sleep
Despite
a
the
lot
fact,
easier.
this is from coods.co.uk. Despite the fact that it is now very normal for couples to live together without getting married, the law does not recognize these relationships. Many people still believe they automatically have legal rights if they live with a partner, but in fact, common law marriage is a myth that has no basis in law.
Nice.
For example, it can be very difficult to establish your rights to a property if you separate from your partner. Blah blah blah. Yeah, common law marriage. Understanding the myth of common law marriage apparently is another.
That's good.
thing.
I'm very relieved about that.
Yeah.
But you know what Dad's saying about you need to be. It's like the cost of your freedom. Like, that's a great way of looking at it. Patrice O'Neill would say it's kind of like you're buying back your soul, because you get to just like be free and do it. And the way you've got to see it is like, well, I'm going to be super happy and maybe they'll live off me if I'm the earner. But you know what? I'm just going to let that freedom, like, enjoy it, and they'll have to do their own thing and live with it. So that can definitely be the way to go. But it just... So we've spoken for ages about like the downside, how it couldn't work. You could lose all your assets. It doesn't mean you're more committed, but like break it down. Like what is the real benefit of it? Like, why is it useful?
So going back to when I did this poll, I asked people, what are your views on marriage?
Right.
And I think that it would be a good way to address that question by answering some of the things that people have said as to why they think it would be a cool thing. So for example,
this could be insightful.
I think it will be insightful. I've got lots of them. So someone called Alrurab, sorry if I pronounced that wrong, said, my parents are divorced, so I don't really believe in it, but someday I want to be married. I'm still a romantic person. So there's romance. There's this idea of romance and this idea of being with that one person, and it's this, I don't know, I'm trying to support it, and now everything we've said, I just want to go against it.
No, I mean, like, there's definitely a thing where making that commitment for that moment would probably feel like the best day of your life and like the most romantic thing in the world. And obviously I'm sounding like super bitter and old and just like, you know, scared of it. I could totally get how for that moment it will be the most romantic thing you can do. But I guess I just question whether that commitment is it really a commitment for the long term? Because everyone says it is, but eventually a lot of them end.
Yeah. And it's so funny because even my idea of marriage, I'm like, yeah, one day, you know, I'm 24 now. Maybe I want to get married when I'm 29, and the run up to that is so exciting. You know, gonna find that person when I'm like 27, get married
exactly.
at 29, and then in my head I'm really like,
oh, it'd be great.
I probably won't stay with them forever. Like, probably end up getting divorced when the kids leave, right? Like, that's what the norm. Because the idea of staying with someone my whole life is like, what? No.
That might be a healthy way of looking at it. Like, why does there have to be this much pressure?
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to be with you forever, regardless. Like, maybe that's not the best way to be. But that's why, like, why would you add the complexity? Why wouldn't you just be like, well, I can leave and you can leave, but if we're here every day, that's us being romantic and being together.
So Emily Louise Murray said, I think it's a beautiful celebration of love and family.
Okay, yeah. Still, again, it's like this one day where it's like a massive celebration, or do you think she meant like over the long term?
I think that maybe she meant, I think over the long term, probably it's a beautiful celebration of love and family. I think that you can, like we've been talking about, you can celebrate love, and I get it. Like, and some people have said, you know, it will be a really fun party, and like the run up to that whole celebration of that day and that commitment to each other in this really public display of happiness and joy is really, really lovely. And like the opposite to a wedding, I know this is kind of dark, but like as I'm thinking of like a funeral, and we don't really have events where like people come together that are like full of joy. I mean, I guess parties are like that, but weddings are supposed to be like the pinnacle of, I guess, celebrating existence on earth, because a wedding symbolizes like you're gonna have children and fertility and continuing that on, which is like a celebration of life in a way. Marriage,
yeah, there's almost something romantic about being irrational about it. Like, it's very romantic to just be like,
yes,
well, I'm just going to let everything go and forget what the consequences are because we're going to be together.
Yeah.
And it's awesome. It's just when you listen to everyone like 10 years down the line, they're like, oh, such a fucking stupid decision. I hate this person. I don't want to be here. And it's just like, you know, it's the worst. Like, so, but yeah, on the flip side, so what was the person's name that said it?
Emily,
like, on the flip side, you do get those examples, you know, of like 90-year-old parents that are still together and like super in love. And that it's almost like that is the ultimate level to be at. And I'm almost accepting that I'm going to be one level below that in a relationship, because I'll never know what that true level of like commitment is, where you'll truly know you're never going to leave each other and that option isn't on the table.
Yeah.
It just, how many people does it actually happen to? And you can still have a great time and be super in love with someone, but at least you always know if you fucking hate them, you can just leave.
One thing on that which is really funny is I ask people, when some people say that they met the one and they just knew, you know, it implies that they knew that that person was the one they were going to marry. I asked in a poll, have you guys experienced this? 49% of people said yes, 51% said no. And of those 49% of people I asked, were you right in that that person was the one? And 50% of people said no.
So wait. So it was 50%, basically 50% of people said they knew the minute they met someone. And then of that 50%, half of them were like, yeah, I got that wrong.
Yeah. Half of them were like, yeah, no, that was wrong. And then I uploaded it on Instagram and I said, the rest of you guys think that that person is still the one or whatever. Like, just wait a few more years.
No. Yeah, exactly. Oh, it's gutting. But that's the thing. Like, there will be 25 or 10 or 5% of people that it is right and it makes sense. And it in my head, it makes the relationship like 3% better. Like, it's marginally, like, initially you'll get this huge explosion of emotion, and then over years it'll kind of die down, but there'll be that nice feeling inside, like, this person wants to be with me, they're here, we're married, we did every commitment we could, we're together, isn't this great? But for 97% of people, it'll be like, either someone will be like, well, I'm going to stick it out for a few more years because I want to get the upside and then leave. Or the other person's like, shit, I really hope this person either doesn't divorce, or I really want to get out of this, but I don't want to lose this, and this. But all of this, in my head, it's like largely redundant when you have kids. It's like, unless you're a shitty person, you're going to look after your kids, and that person is forever going to be associated with you. If they're the mother of your kids or you're the dad, like, you're always going to be connected. Whereas marriage doesn't do that. So it's not as big a commitment, and the kids is the main thing. And that's where you got to choose really wisely.
Yeah. And that's what, let me see what some other people put. I don't think it's necessary anymore, especially if you both work and don't have kids. I mean, most of the people, to be honest, like, most of these wrote, it's completely irrelevant. This is Sebas779. It's completely irrelevant. You don't need to get married to be committed to someone. Agreed.
Great shout.
MKA Crimson wrote, I had a Christian upbringing. I felt a lot of pressure to get married faster because we lived together. And she did mention that she got married young because there was pressure. She said there is love there, but she did feel pressure.
I mean, isn't that the worst though? Like, she felt
I know.
I mean, it's awesome if she's happy now and they're together, but she could have easily been with someone that she didn't love. And it was like, why? Because some arbitrary religion said you should do this early.
I did ask her, I said, was that really hard? Do you ever resent your family for that pressure or not at all? And she said, we were living together first, which was not what they wanted. So in order to fix that, we had to get married ASAP.
Jeez.
You know, now I think now they're really happy and they are in love.
That's good.
They said we still wanted to marry each other, but we had a 5-month engagement versus 1 or 2 years, which is difficult when other people kind of dictate how your relationship should go like that. And especially if it's rooted in religion, which, you know.
But there's just such a timer. It's just like, and it's almost like you're still on that treadmill of life of like, well, this is my next step on the social ladder of ticking a box. Because if you don't get married, maybe there's something a bit odd about you. Like, why haven't you got married? And so, and these stigmas, because they're just been entrenched since 4000 BC or 2000 BC and 4000 years ago, then they're going to be here for a long time. But are they, you know, you used to be able to hit people with a stick like 100 years ago. Does that mean it's still the right institution or thing to do?
Yeah.
That was stolen from Bill Burr, by the way. That wasn't like an original thought or anything.
Oh, really? Because I was going to say, you used to be able to like hang, draw and quarter. What is it?
Hung, drawn and quartered. I mean, that is pretty intense. But, you know, in essence, that's what you do in a marriage. You get hung, drawn and quartered right down the side and then everything gets split. Yeah. So, it's pretty brutal.
A few more things before we wrap this up is somebody said, in addition, kind of going on of what you were saying, someone said, it's not a valid goal in life. It's not necessary. This is Maya Englund. Not a valid goal in life, not necessary to establish love. a beautiful ritual if genuine.
It's a good point.
Someone wrote, Lucy Benjamin SLT, commitment celebrate big life decisions with friends and family who you hope support through. So I guess a lot of people are saying that it's nice in terms of celebration, of a commitment, of love, that your friends and family can be there. Court_Kim wrote, nice to be legally recognized as being a team and one family.
It's an interesting idea.
Danny_Golf wrote, it's a choice and one that many people have different reasons for. Per Chapman wrote, being legally bound to someone by conforming with society's pressures and standards. Ada C 2.0, don't see the point. It's a patriarchy religious celebration. Our
So
good friend
true.
Fraser, he said, don't marry, you get fucked on tax. If you do marry, you get fucked on divorce.
It's so true. It's so true. That's the thing. And the thing is, nowadays, it seems like everyone in our generations and like Gen Z and stuff are seeing that there isn't really a need to do it. But I don't think anyone can argue that for some people it's like the right thing because they're never, ever, ever going to leave each other. It's just, we just got to get out of this mindset of like, oh yeah, like when people get married, they think nothing will change. And it's like, think how big your ego has to be when the majority of marriages end. Like most of them don't work out. What you and the person you're with in your 20s have magically figured out how to be together over the millions and millions of people who've got married and then it didn't work. There's such an ego there. There's like, do you know what? Maybe accept that it won't. So I like your idea of like, if you're going to do it, maybe just accept that in 10 years it's not going to work out, but you're willing to take that sacrifice. Or you might be like me and be like, yeah, I'm not going through that. I'd rather just be together for 10 years. And then if it doesn't work, it doesn't work.
Yeah. So apparently 42% of marriages in England and Wales, this was in 2017 because that's the latest year they have stats for, those marriages end in divorce, and the average median length of marriage at the time of divorce is 12.2 years.
Wow, that's longer than I thought.
Personally, from my own perspective, I think that if I was going to get married, I would do it. But I would, oh God, this sounds so bad, and I really hope my future potential husband isn't listening to this, but like potentially going into it of the idea of, if this is going to be like a 10-year, 15-year thing for the kids and to have that family unit, and obviously it would be lovely to grow old with somebody and have someone hold my hand as I die, but is that realistic? I personally don't think so, not for me. And maybe I could meet someone when I am like 70 or 80 who could be that person.
When you say not realistic, what do you mean?
I don't think it's realistic. I mean, the stats like speak for themselves, because even those people who end up staying married, how many of them are still married because of love? Not sure. But I don't think it's realistic to think I'm going to meet someone by the time I'm 30, 35, whatever, who I'm going to want to stay with for the rest of my life. Like, I don't think it's realistic that if we got married, we would stay married till I'm 100,000 years old.
But that's the mentality that I think is potentially sad or like the wrong one. So what I mean by that is like, I think a lot of people who are like, don't get married, obviously immediately you're going for like, financially, it's the worst decision you can make. And I've banged on about that now for like an hour. But I don't think necessarily we should take the mentality we're not going to find the person, or we're not already with the people that you'd want to be with until the end. Just getting married has absolutely nothing to do with it. And so like, yeah, it's not likely, like it's very unlikely we're going to be with that or like 100% find that person. But if you take the mentality you're not going to, then yeah, maybe it will only last 10 years. But the marriage just makes it so restricted and formal, and you never know, like that person might be around the corner and you've just locked yourself off to that world.
But irregardless of marriage, like I have friends, you know, like my friends right now who I have are people who I want to grow old with. Like I want these people to be my support network forever.
Yeah.
I don't have one friend that and like I know that maybe I just haven't met that person yet, but like I've had, you know, almost a 7-year relationship in the past, and that was an amazing thing, but like I still needed a strong support network of friends.
For sure.
Do I think it's likely that I'm going to meet one person who I think can be that main person for me for 30, 40 years? No, because it's never happened before, because I don't know anyone really who has that. I know couples who are married, but I don't know, I am skeptical. I don't think it's a sad thing, a sad opinion. I don't feel sad about it. I feel like I've got friends who I want to grow old with. I want to know them forever. I'm going to still be calling them in 40 years' time. And it would be great to add to that circle of people. And if I can meet someone who I think is particularly special, who I want to be the father of my children, which is what I want to happen, amazing. But am I putting all of my eggs in one basket that that's going to be the person for Evs? Nah.
No, it's fair. I
don't think so.
Don't disagree with you.
Well, Tesh,
it's been eventful.
Thank you so much for coming on the pod. It's been very eventful. I actually had a really great chat with you.
Nice.